So we have the setup, so it has to be made public. So it's not just the teachers just setting somebody up. So for instance, when my successor Shinko had what's known as Dharma holder, when he'd finished koan study and he reached a certain point, I said, okay, now you can have Dharma combat with the community, so they can really see who you are and see if you actually deserve it or not, and see what your training has been. So he did that, and it all worked out well. And this is something similar, except it's basically a test case. So they just put something in. So say a snake had been thrown in here, we'd see how all of you react. The one who reacts best can take over. I'm not so picky, in that way. But so they do that. He puts a water jug up, and then he puts something. It's in many ways it's a ridiculous question. Sure, it's a water jug, but you ask a Spanish person, they'll say it's whatever it is, or a German, or a Japanese. It's got a certain name, and there's the actuality of whatever that is that's there. And so the head monk is a little bit more intellectual. He says, well, you can't call it a wooden shoe. Well, it's true, isn't it? You can't. You could, but it doesn't affect the reality of the situation. The nice thing is, then you see into the personality of Isan, the Tenzo. He's been cooking, and with Yakujo, there's probably over 500 monks in there. So in that particular monastery, so he's busy. He's busy with 500 monks. Because he's got to do all of the menu designs. He's got to talk with the abbot and see when to loosen things up and when to tighten things up, when to give them really good food, when to, just give them austere foods. Obviously, if there's been donations, use the donations up. If there's a time of austerity, how much to, actually they used to dilute the breakfast gruel or lunch. They used to sometimes make it, it's almost like a drink rather than actually a food. All of these things came in. People who are sick, how much to put on one side, what foods to give them. There's many different things like that. What guests are coming in, has to know all of these things. So he's invited into the monastery, to this particular hall, and we're not sure whether he's expecting to have this Dharma combat. It seems like it's a little secret, in that he'd call in a sidekick, and then he suddenly calls everybody in. And so Isan hears the question, goes up and just kicks it over and walks out. And what does that tell you about him in terms of his own personality?
He's decisive.
Oh, definitely decisive.
He's daring.
Well, yeah, daring, decisive.
Is he frustrated?
Well, put yourself in. Again, this is one of the elements of koan. Put yourself in the place of. It's like Native Americans say, you can't judge somebody until you walk,
Right.
So many miles in their shoes.
You have to go get the rice on lunch.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. What is this crap? It's a water jug. Kick it over. Get on. But he's young too. It's like an older person probably wouldn't do that. He might crack it or something like that. Might just pour a glass of water or something and walk out. It's valid. All of it's valid, but the thing is, how are you going to be appropriate to the situation? That's more sort of what so-called Zen expression. And it doesn't mean, say, just in a formal situation like this. It's like somebody asks you about what Zen is, or I'm going through these difficulties in my life. What can I do? If you're a ballpark sort of person that just gives the party line, how's that going to help people? This is what these koans are about. These are about events that occurred. And it happens to me. Somebody who's dying, what do you do? What do you say to them? To give them comfort or to help them. All these koans are about that. See, and you'll have it with people. Some of them will be humorous and they'll reach them. Some of them will be serious. And they're asking about something that's really bothering them. Again, is that if you can't answer, an opportunity is lost. So that's the cutting edge really of Zen practice. It's not only, well, I feel okay in myself, but how do you communicate it? Again, you go back to Shakyamuni Buddha. And it just cracks me up on this level, because he says, I'm enlightened now. What should I do now? And he goes, well, I don't think anybody can understand this. It's taken me 6 years of intense sitting, and there's all of these ascetics around doing all these weird things, and they'll probably be doing those weird things until they die. How can I teach this? I could just die now and I'm done. But he didn't. A lot of people in those traditions at that time, the Jains and stuff, they would get to the point, because they didn't want to cause harm and stuff, they would just die. They're done. But the other part of it, this is the beauty of say, Buddhism, but it's not that. That's the heart of Shakyamuni, and what he saw was that, I'll try. I will try. Simple as that, I will try. He didn't know what he was going to do. And when you think about it, a lot of us that sort of like Buddhism, for instance, will kind of go, well, he had a good life. He taught for 40 years. He gave the speech at Vulture Peak, did all of these sutras and stuff like that. Well, that's all very well and good. That's great. But they also had a difficult time, which is equally as difficult as any of us. For one, he couldn't go back to his own country. Why? Because his mother's country had destroyed it. Can you imagine having that sadness in your own heart? And because he converted his own family to this way of living the life, there was no rulers for his own country, and that's why the country fell. He was next in line, and he took his cousin, who was his mother's sister's son. He took half the royal family with him. And then on top of that, his cousin got jealous of him, tried to kill him 4 times. How many of you would allow somebody to, take your life 4 times? I wouldn't. I don't think I could do that kind of thing. And then at the end of his life, well, also, dealing with cannibals, mass murderers, country rulers, only being responsible for, say, up to 300 monks that couldn't stay in one spot for more than a few months because there wasn't enough food, and having to migrate around the country. This is what, this was the basis of, say, Buddhist life at that time. Again, this was his daily life. This is what he did. This is the spirit of Buddhism. I'll try. So, it's like for myself, is sometimes I come across things that seem unsurmountable, But the precedent, the koan, for me is Shakyamuni Buddha did it. Bodhidharma did it. And then to some of these more obscure teachers in history, say in Japan, that aren't famous, who were guys like you and me, they did it in whatever way that they could do it. They didn't have to look like Shakyamuni or Bodhidharma or Rinzai or Tozan or Dogen. They didn't have to look like any of those guys. They found a way of working through it. Again, this is why in Zen or in Buddhism is that they say 3 essentials: great faith, great doubt or questioning, and great determination. Don't sort of underwrite that. I mean, not underwrite, but undervalue that determination, because sometimes that determination is wanting to want to. It seems like a funny thing to say, but sometimes you're just like, it's so tough. But if you want to, one way or another, by staying aware of the situation, you'll find a way through it. And what's the alternative? That's also a good thing to do. What's your alternative if you give up? And I'm not saying just practice in this case. I'm just saying your desire to actually move through difficulty in that way. Because if you want to, one way or another, you're going to get the strength to do it. If you give up, you start again. That's one of the most important things on practice. Can you imagine Isan on that mountain for 10 years? He might have been somebody that really liked company too. Can you imagine? He'd had say maybe as many as 10 years of being in a monastery of 500 people, and he goes up there on his own. Can you imagine what he went through in his own mind? It's quite something. But again, it shows a beautiful mentality. I haven't got time for this. This is the work that's most important.